something fundamental changed in how we experience attraction and connection. What we were told about healthy relationships and mutual interest isn't matching reality for millions of people. Most people think you keep choosing emotionally unavailable partners because you're damaged, because you have low self-esteem, or because you don't know better. But the truth is, far more disturbing and far more predictable than that. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. This isn't about weakness, bad judgment, or self-sabotage. It's about the neurochemistry of intermittent reinforcement and how your brain responds to uncertainty in ways that mimic addiction. The same mechanisms that keep people pulling slot machine levers are keeping you hooked on people who barely show up. And understanding why this happens is the first step to breaking free from the pattern. I've had the same conversation with hundreds of people who can't figure out why they keep attracting emotionally unavailable partners. I counsel intelligent, self-aware individuals who've read the books, done the therapy, and understand attachment theory intellectually, but still find themselves obsessed with people who won't commit, won't communicate, and won't show up consistently. I've watched this repeat across every demographic: successful professionals, people with secure friendships, individuals who function perfectly well in every other area of their lives, all of them trapped in the same exhausting cycle, with partners who are hot one day and cold the next. The patterns are clear, predictable, and consistent, and anyone who's been through it recognizes the signs immediately. The anxiety when they don't text back, the high when they finally do, the constant analysis of every word, every interaction, trying to decode what they're really feeling. This isn't random, it's not a coincidence, and it's definitely not about you being broken or choosing poorly. It's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do when faced with unpredictable rewards. Think about the last time you were genuinely interested in someone who was completely available, who texted you back consistently, who made plans and kept them, who clearly communicated their interest and showed up reliably. Now notice how that felt compared to the person who kept you guessing, the one who'd be intensely present for 3 days and then disappear for a week, the one who'd say all the right things and then act like you barely existed, the one who made you feel incredible when you were together, but anxious and uncertain the moment you were apart. Which one occupied more of your mental space? Which one did you think about constantly? Which relationship felt more intense, more consuming, more like you couldn't breathe without knowing where you stood? The unavailable person, every single time. Go to any therapy office, any support group, any conversation among friends discussing dating, and you'll hear the same story repeated endlessly. The nice, available person felt boring. The inconsistent, unavailable person felt electric. The evidence is everywhere, once you're willing to see it. Neurochemical hijacking. Your brain doesn't differentiate between gambling and emotionally unavailable partners because both activate the same reward pathways with the same neurochemical response. This happens because unpredictable rewards trigger dopamine surges that predictable rewards don't. When someone is consistently available and responsive, your brain habituates. The dopamine response flattens. You get the reward every time, so your brain stops treating it as special or exciting. But when the reward is intermittent and unpredictable, when you don't know if they'll text back or disappear, if they'll be warm or distant, if this weekend will happen or get cancelled last minute, your brain stays in a heightened state of anticipation. Every positive interaction becomes a jackpot. Every text back feels like winning. Every moment of attention creates a dopamine spike that you become desperate to recreate. I counseled someone who described this perfectly. She said, "When he finally texted me back after 3 days of silence, I felt this rush that was better than anything I'd felt with guys who texted me every day. I knew it was unhealthy. I knew he was treating me poorly. But that moment when his name appeared on my screen felt like I could finally breathe again. That's not love. That's not chemistry. That's your brain responding to intermittent reinforcement. The exact same way it responds to slot machines, to gambling, to any situation where the reward is unpredictable but occasionally present. And this repeats across every relationship where one person is inconsistent. The anxious waiting, the high when they finally show up, the crash when they pull away again, the obsessive thoughts, trying to figure out how to make them stay. It's a dopamine cycle that your brain interprets as intense connection when it's actually just intense uncertainty. You've noticed this pattern in yourself, haven't you? The way consistent attention feels flat while inconsistent attention feels addictive? The anxiety attraction loop. Anxiety and attraction get neurologically linked when someone is inconsistently available, and your brain starts interpreting anxiety as proof of deep feelings. Studies on attachment and arousal show that when people experience physiological anxiety in the presence of someone, they often misattribute that anxiety as attraction or love. Your racing heart, your obsessive thoughts, your inability to focus on anything else, these aren't signs of a deep connection. They're signs of activated threat response. But your brain doesn't know the difference. It just knows that this person makes you feel intensely, makes your heart race, makes you think about them constantly. And it interprets that intensity as meaning they must be special, must be worth it, must be the one. I had a client who spent 6 months obsessed with a man who barely acknowledged her existence most of the time. She'd go days without hearing from him, then he'd send a long text about how much he missed her, and she'd be right back in, convinced this was real connection. She described feeling more alive, more present, more herself when she was with him than she'd ever felt before. When we broke down what she was actually feeling, it wasn't love or chemistry. It was constant low-grade panic. She never knew where she stood. She was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every good moment felt temporary. Every interaction felt fragile. Every day felt like she might lose him. That's not romance. That's hypervigilance. And this is standard across every anxious attachment dynamic. The person who makes you feel calm and secure gets labeled boring. The person who makes you feel anxious and uncertain gets labeled passionate. Your brain has learned to associate anxiety with love because that's what early relationships, or family dynamics, or past trauma taught it. The intensity wasn't connection. It was anxiety being misinterpreted as attraction. Doesn't that make sense when you look back at the relationships that consumed you? Asterisk, asterisk. If this is hitting home, drop a comment below and tell me. What pattern have you noticed in your own attraction to unavailable people? I read every comment, and your insights help other people realize they're not alone in this. Let's keep going. Asterisk, asterisk. The scarcity principle. What's difficult to obtain becomes more valuable in your mind regardless of its actual worth, and emotionally unavailable partners exploit this psychological principle perfectly. This happens because human psychology assigns higher value to scarce resources than abundant ones. When someone's time, attention, and affection are limited and unpredictable, your brain categorizes them as rare and therefore precious. When someone is readily available, your brain categorizes them as common and therefore less valuable. It doesn't matter if the available person is objectively better, kinder, more compatible, more attractive. The scarcity principle overrides rational evaluation. The person who's hard to pin down, who's always busy, who gives you breadcrumbs of attention, automatically seems more desirable, simply because they're less accessible. I saw this with a woman who was dating 2 men simultaneously. One was a successful entrepreneur who texted her every morning, made plans days in advance, showed genuine interest in her life, and treated her with consistent respect. The other was a bartender who barely remembered their plans, cancelled constantly, only texted when he was drunk, and made her feel like she was competing for his attention. She couldn't stop thinking about the bartender. The entrepreneur felt too easy. She said she didn't feel a spark with him, even though objectively he was everything she claimed to want. The bartender made her feel alive, even though objectively he was offering her almost nothing. That's the scarcity principle in action. Her brain assigned value based on availability, not on actual worth. The harder someone is to get, the more your brain convinces you they must be worth getting. And this pattern repeats everywhere in modern dating. The person who pursues you consistently gets friend-zoned. The person who barely acknowledges your existence becomes your obsession. Have you seen this play out in your own attraction patterns? The fantasy projection. When someone is emotionally unavailable, they give you just enough information to work with, but not enough to contradict the perfect version you've created in your mind. This happens because inconsistent presence allows you to fill in the gaps with fantasy. When someone shows up fully, consistently, authentically, you see who they actually are, including their flaws, their bad days, their annoying habits. But when someone is rarely fully present, when they only show you fragments, you get to imagine the rest. And your imagination is always more generous, more flattering, more perfect than reality would be. That text they finally sent after 3 days of silence, you read it as proof they were thinking about you the whole time, missing you, wanting you, just too busy or overwhelmed to reach out. The reality might be they were dating other people, didn't think about you at all, and texted when they were bored. But you don't know that, so you fill the silence with the story that feels best, the story where they're secretly just as invested as you are, just struggling with vulnerability or commitment issues or past trauma that explains why they can't show up fully yet. I counseled a man who spent a year pursuing a woman who saw him maybe twice a month, texted sporadically, and never made him a priority in her life. He was convinced she was his soulmate. He'd built this entire narrative about how she was guarded because of her painful past, how she needed someone patient who wouldn't push her, how their connection was so deep she was scared of it. When she finally ended it, saying she just wasn't interested and never had been, he was devastated. Not because he lost the real person, but because he lost the fantasy version he'd been in love with for a year. You've done this too, haven't you? Built entire relationships in your head with people who barely existed in your actual life. The intermittent reinforcement trap. Variable ratio reinforcement schedules create the strongest behavioral conditioning, and emotionally unavailable partners provide the perfect accidental implementation of this psychological principle. This happens because research on operant conditioning shows that behaviors rewarded unpredictably are the hardest to extinguish. If someone rewards you every time you reach out, you'll engage with them, but the behavior isn't particularly resistant to extinction. If they never reward you, you'll stop trying quickly. But if they reward you sometimes, unpredictably, with no discernible pattern, you'll keep trying indefinitely because your brain keeps thinking the next attempt might be the one that works. That's why slot machines use variable ratio reinforcement. That's why mobile games give random rewards. That's why loot boxes are so addictive. And that's exactly what emotionally unavailable partners provide, whether they mean to or not. Sometimes they text back immediately. Sometimes they take 3 days. Sometimes they're affectionate and warm. Sometimes they're distant and cold. Sometimes they make solid plans. Sometimes they cancel last minute. There's no pattern you can predict, no way to know what will make them show up, so you keep trying everything, hoping something will work. I counseled someone whose partner was warm and present maybe one weekend a month. The rest of the time he was distant, dismissive, barely available. But that one good weekend was enough to keep her hooked for months, because she kept thinking, if she just said the right thing, did the right thing, gave him enough space, or didn't give him too much space, she could make every weekend like the good one. She couldn't, because he wasn't responding to her behavior at all. He was just randomly available when his own life circumstances allowed it. But her brain interpreted his intermittent availability as a puzzle she could solve, rather than what it actually was. Random reinforcement that had her behaviorally trapped. Have you felt that pull to keep trying? Just one more time. Even if you recognize all of this intellectually, it doesn't solve the neurochemical problem, because knowing why your brain is responding this way doesn't automatically change the dopamine response. Advice like, just choose someone emotionally available, or stop dating unavailable people, misses the point entirely. You're not consciously choosing to be attracted to unavailable people. Your reward system is responding to intermittent reinforcement in ways that override your conscious intentions. The available person doesn't trigger the same neurochemical cascade. They don't create the anxiety that your brain misinterprets as chemistry. They don't provide the scarcity that makes your brain assign high value. They don't give you space for fantasy projection. They don't offer intermittent reinforcement. They offer consistency, predictability, reliability, and your brain, conditioned by past patterns and evolutionary wiring, reads that as boring. The system makes it nearly impossible to naturally feel attracted to what's actually healthy, because your neurochemistry is literally working against your conscious desires. And that's why so many people keep cycling through the same pattern, not because they're self-sabotaging or have low self-esteem, but because they're fighting against hardwired neurological responses that interpret inconsistency as desirable. There is no easy workaround. There's only awareness and the difficult work of consciously choosing against what feels natural. Synthesis collapse. When you connect all of this, here's what it actually means. Your brain interprets unpredictability as excitement because of dopamine surges from intermittent rewards. Your anxiety around unavailable partners gets misread as attraction because your body can't differentiate between threat response and romantic interest. Scarcity makes unavailable partners seem more valuable, regardless of their actual worth or how they treat you. Their inconsistent presence lets you project a fantasy version that's always better than reality would be. And intermittent reinforcement creates the strongest behavioral conditioning, keeping you hooked longer than consistent good treatment or consistent bad treatment ever could. Every single variable points to the same unavoidable conclusion. You're not attracted to emotionally unavailable partners because of chemistry, compatibility, or genuine connection. You're attracted to the neurochemical response pattern they trigger. You're literally addicted to the uncertainty, not the person. It's not a fluke, a rare occurrence, or a matter of bad luck. It's the predictable outcome of how your brain responds to unpredictable rewards, combined with whatever early conditioning taught you to associate love with anxiety, scarcity, and pursuit. The pattern will continue until you consciously intervene against your own neurochemical responses, which is brutal, because it means choosing what feels wrong in order to get what's actually right. You're not wrong for feeling this pattern. You're not broken or damaged for struggling with this. This isn't moral failure or poor judgment. It's neuroscience and conditioning colliding in ways that work against your stated goals. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why available people feel flat and unavailable people feel electric. That's how your nervous system currently works. But understanding this gives you a choice. You can keep following the dopamine hits toward people who'll never show up consistently, or you can consciously override your reward system and choose differently despite how it feels. Choosing the available person won't feel as intense. It won't feel as consuming. It might even feel boring at first. That's not because they're wrong for you. That's because consistency doesn't trigger the same neurochemical response as chaos. The work is training your brain to interpret safety as attractive and consistency as valuable, instead of letting intermittent reinforcement and anxiety drive your choices. Until you do that work, the pattern continues, and recognizing the mechanism is the first step to breaking free from it. That's not just okay, that's the beginning of actual change. Asterisk, asterisk. If this resonated with you, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one thing you wish you'd understood earlier about your attraction patterns? Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found this helpful, share it with someone who's stuck in this cycle. Let's break these patterns together. Asterisk, asterisk.